Good morning and welcome to TADSummmit EMEA Americas November 2021. My name is Yusuf Kaka and I'm the head of technology for ayoba. Today I'll be telling you a little bit about our journey as an OTT startup living alongside a large operator, MTN Group, which is the largest mobile operator in Africa. Today's agenda is really simple, just three main themes that I want to chat about. Firstly, an introduction to ayoba, a little bit about our relationship with MTN in a section called Proximity Matters, and then finally, how ayoba fits into a broader ecosystem beyond our large partner MTN. So ayoba is a what we call a super app. It was conceptualized by MTN Group as part of its third wave of innovation. When I last presented at a TADSummmit in 2018, we had just started this journey of the third wave. And I explained back then that our first wave of innovation was GSM. Our second wave of innovation at MTN was when we entered the mobile financial services space with a product called Mobile Money, which is doing really, really well across Africa. The third wave of innovation, as I described in 2018, was MTN's approach to digital services and content. ayoba is a result of that strategic initiative. And there's a few reasons for why we went the super app route. Firstly, to explain what a super app is from our point of view, a super app is a mobile app that has one core function, but over and above that provides a myriad of services that users can engage with that might be provided by us or might be provided by third parties. And another important aspect of a super app that we've come to discover is a mechanism to for users to pay for content and services and for third parties to charge for the content and service. So some sort of mobile financial services integration is usually critical to a super app. So at the heart of ayoba, we have messaging or instant messaging. And for that, we've been using an XMPP-based platform. We've also bolted onto the service voice over IP and video over IP functionality. And more recently, we've also added the ability for third parties to bring their content and services into ayoba through various sections on the app. One of them being channels. Channels is a medium for distributing content in one direction. So our partners are the likes of content providers that want to share video or articles or content in general. And these can be globally relative or in many cases highly optimized for local needs. We also have a section on the app for games. These games are provided by third parties in most instances. And then we've got a specific homepage for music on the app. ayoba was built on top of a company that was initially involved in music streaming services in our markets. So there's quite a rich history with music, and music forms a core part of the application at this point in time. We also have tagged in an ecosystem of partners. I'll go into that a little bit more in detail on the third part of this presentation. And finally, also worth mentioning is that we've got some integration at the moment with MTN's mobile money service, which allows for users to do person-to-person transfers at this point in time. But hopefully next year we'll be evolving that a lot further and making it possible for our service providers and our ecosystem to also engage with some of those financial services capabilities within ayoba. So what problem does ayoba solve? For us, it's a little bit related to bridging the digital divide, a theme that was quite popular in Africa and emerging markets maybe 10 or 20 years ago. But while mobile operators like MTN have solved the fundamental problem of extending physical connectivity to all citizens, where in most of the MTN markets we have greater than 90% coverage in terms of GSM and sometimes even 2G and 3G coverage at that rate. What we haven't solved is financial inclusion and making sure that people can afford that connectivity. So what ayoba does is it provides access to internet services at no financial cost. And this particularly at this point in time to MTN users. We zero rate the service to our users, which means that even when they run out of data or airtime, as we call it in some markets, they're still able to use ayoba. They're still able to use features like instant messaging, like browsing channels and content, playing games, listening to music, and most importantly, also interacting with the services that are provided by our partners. So this opens up a whole world of possibilities for our users and for our partners at the end of the day. Many people have questioned whether ayoba can compete with services like WhatsApp and Telegram and some of the other more popular services. And the answer is probably yes, because of the reasons stated, because of the advantage of being able to zero rate our content and service. From research that we've got on the MTN side, users can go without data and airtime for up to 19 days a month in certain countries. And typically it's between 11 and 19 days a month that on average people go without access to internet services. So by making it affordable, we close that gap. And this provides an opportunity for service providers to reach users for most of the month, and allows users to engage with the internet content and services without interruption as well. So what makes ayoba's relationship with MTN special is that it's not inside MTN. ayoba is strategically placed outside of MTN for a good reason. I put it down to what I call the second law of enterprise agility. And roughly what that means is that as a company or an industry becomes really good at what it does, it becomes less flexible in being able to transform itself. And MTN has recognized that it is a really proficient and efficient mobile operator and really optimized at being able to deliver connectivity, deliver SIM cards, prepaid services, voice calls, and also mobile data. It's not really optimized to be able to deliver and build digital services. So in order to build that capability, MTN decided to establish a small company on the outside as a startup, leverage on one of its partners, Simfi, as a seeding company in terms of skills and technology, and then build ayoba from that point of view. So there's a few things that are different about the way ayoba operates from MTN. Firstly, as I mentioned, it operates like a startup, meaning that it's not bound by some of the things that might slow down an enterprise. We have our own governance structures, our own rules. We have our own risk appetite, which is very important as well. So ayoba pretty much operates externally from MTN in that regard. There's a governance structure that also defines how we work with MTN and what can and what should be leveraged between ayoba and MTN. So when I talk about proximity matters, it's all about that gray line that separates MTN from ayoba. It's important to keep that line in place, which is why this section is called proximity matters. What we want to avoid is a situation where the large enterprise slows down the small startup to a point where it cannot deliver on its mandate. MTN has the scale and size of a large global organization, and ayoba needs to be nimble and agile. So in terms of what gets leveraged from from MTN, it's really important that we think about it very, very carefully. Many of the advantages or benefits that can be derived from MTN are double-edged. The obvious first starting point for leveraging capability from MTN side is around investment. So MTN is our primary investor and only investor at this point in time. We do leverage the brand in many regards. So there is some association between ayoba and MTN in the markets that we operate in. But as you can imagine, this has lots of benefits, but also can have some negative aspects as well. Give an example, many users that we interact with have the understanding or feeling that ayoba might only be available to MTN users, which is not the case. It's an OTT service, meaning that ayoba's customers are anyone that can get access to the internet from a mobile device. So, having too much of a brand association might confuse users in certain cases. It also makes it really difficult to build an ecosystem or partnerships with operators outside of MTN. They quickly recognize the brand association and are worried that working with ayoba might negatively impact their competition with MTN in different markets. So it has its pros and cons. We also, for example, leverage the distribution network from MTN. So MTN over the years has built an amazing distribution network with third parties and informal and formal traders that distribute SIM cards and are part of the mobile financial services or MoMo network as well. This is something that we've started leveraging in terms of our marketing as well. So at this point in time, in many countries, we have what we call foot soldiers that are usually selling SIM cards, now also introducing users to ayoba. One of the things that we had to be very careful about is whether we should be leveraging technology from MTN. And we definitely do leverage technology, but there's always a temptation to lean on very complex and robust telco systems and try and pull those into your startup ecosystem. But often those are too heavyweight for what you're trying to achieve in a startup and may hinder your efforts in the long run. So we're very careful about what we use from a technology perspective from the MTN side. The other area that we also leverage from MTN is when it comes to skilled people. Besides myself, there are a number of other people that work between MTN and ayoba, bringing the telco knowledge, bringing the understanding of the customer, the mobile operators' customers in many cases, and bring that knowledge and understanding into ayoba, and keeping the localization aspects of the service real at the end of the day. So that's another area that we also leverage from the mothership, so to speak. But again, we have to be very careful because the language used within a large operator is very different from that of a startup, and the expectations as well. So it's important, especially when you're talking about people, to make sure that there's a level of understanding, there's a level of translation when you're speaking between the two organizations. Apart from leveraging capabilities, it's also important to have shared goals and KPIs between MTN and ayoba. So we have very well-structured and well-defined goals between the two organizations. There's a common ambition for growing a user base by 2025. And that's a shared goal that both ayoba and MTN have put together, and that is tracked on a yearly basis. And there's also common KPIs. Those KPIs extend into each of the markets that MTN operates in. So there's always going to be a communication between the two organizations in terms of how they can work together to achieve those goals and meet those KPIs. When it comes to engaging between areas like legal, procurement, technology, and security, it's really important to understand that the context is going to be different, and that there's going to be a need for somebody to sit in between, or some people that sit in between, whose role it is to match the impedance, to translate the startup speak to enterprise speak and vice versa. And that's something that we've come to learn is really, really important. And it's something that we feel if it's not there, you have the chance that the smaller company will get sucked into the engines of the larger one, potentially. So some of the things that bridging function is responsible for is establishing a governance framework, doing the translation or impedance messaging, as I call it, and then ensuring that it's easy to leverage some of the functionality and capability from either side. So establishing APIs or building APIs is an example of what can happen on the technology side. And then finally, ensuring that we have shared goals and KPIs is another important function. To zoom into one area, my particular area of interest on the technology side, what the bridging function and me as part of the bridging function was responsible for is leveraging some of the technology services or technology capability from MTN side. Again, being very careful about what we select. And the ones that I have on the screen at the moment are the primary integration points. So we integrate into MTN, into the opcos for SMS. We use OTP for our registration process. We have a feature called SMS continuity in ayoba, which allows an ayoba user to send messages to a non-ayoba user, and this is delivered by SMS. So we have integration with MTN for that. And that continuity is two ways. So we're able to send an SMS and the user is able to reply, and we route that back to the original ayoba sender. And that's something that we can only really do with MTN at this point in time. We've got integration into mobile money in certain countries. And then we've got access to MTN API that gives us information about MSISDNs. As you can imagine, because we have this relationship with MTN and they want to offer slightly preferential services to their users on ayoba, doing things like zero rating, for example, we need to know whether an MSISDN is an MTN MSISDN or not. So we've got an API which allows us to do that and establish whether an MSISDN is MTN or not. And this is specifically useful in countries with mobile network portability. And then finally, as I mentioned, MTN zero rates the service. So there's quite a lot of interaction that needs to happen from a technology point of view for them to be able to identify and classify ayoba traffic. Some of the telco services that ayoba gets from other providers outside of MTN is things like centralized SMS. So when I talk about centralized SMS, I'm talking about our relationship with large SMS providers that allow us to send global SMSs from one bind. And then we've also got a bunch of other API services which give us information about MSISDN outside of MTN territories. We've also got some VoIP infrastructure that we run, but as a fallback, we've got stun and turn services that are provided by third parties as well. So some of the biggest challenges that we've experienced on the technology side, as I mentioned, zero rating is a challenge in general, but when it comes to software as a service in particular, many third parties provide their services through CDNs or IP addresses that are shared by multiple customers. So it makes it really difficult for us to provide identification services to opcos for them to uniquely identify ayoba. Some examples of those services: Firebase Analytics, push notifications that we also use Firebase for, and then some of the more interesting attestation APIs like reCAPTCHA, where we struggle to use those and zero rate them at the same time. So those are opportunities, I guess, for smaller providers to assist us, because what we found is, some of the larger providers might not be able to customize their services for us, but the smaller players are often willing to do something by providing endpoints that are unique to us, and that helps facilitate the zero rating. The last section of this presentation is around the ecosystem, just to give you a snapshot view of how we see the ecosystem that we're trying to build around ayoba. I mentioned the close relationship with MTN, so I'm not going to talk about that. But other than to say that operators are an important part of the ecosystem, ayoba is really looking forward to working with more than just one operator group, and hoping to strike some partnerships in our markets, competing and non-competing markets with other operators, to give their users the same benefits that MTN users have in MTN markets, but also to be able to make our service more usable and friendly to users across Africa. I'll start from the top. Probably one of the most important ecosystems that we are establishing is our developer ecosystem. It's a fundamental feature of a super app to have third-party services available through the app. And we are building and establishing a platform for developers to be able to bring their ideas and make it easily accessible and available on ayoba. As I mentioned before, the zero rating that we apply to the service applies to third-party services as well. So there's a huge benefit for developers and other third parties to make their services available through ayoba, just because of the zero rating aspects. We work with a local company in South Africa called Digital Academy, which helps us establish links to the developer ecosystem. They also are our first-line interface with developers and work with them on a day-to-day basis. And lots of small development houses, everything from single developers to large development houses participating on that side of things. We've also got a network of digital content and service providers that are starting to provide content on our channels. Some of these are at the country level, some of these are global. And then we've also got a network of startup companies that flow out of our solution space, incubation space in Cape Town. I had talked about it in 2018. It used to be directly tied to MTN, but now Solution Space has a closer relationship with ayoba. A lot of the companies that go into Solution Space are within the digital content and services environment, and they work very closely with the ayoba team, looking for opportunities to leverage or be part of the platform. Finally, an area that's going to be growing quite a bit next year is our fintech space. So I mentioned that we have some basic integration with MTN's mobile money setup, allowing person-to-person transfer. But we envisage that a lot of energy is going to be spent next year in broadening that capability. Firstly, on the mobile money side, making sure that service providers can also make use of the MFS capability. but also growing the network and ecosystem to include other mobile financial service providers across the globe and across our markets. On the CPaaS side of the world, we are using and working with a number of CPaaS providers. I touched on them briefly when I talked about SMS services and lookup APIs. One of the advantages that this relationship with MTN brings is that we are able to spot gaps in services that are available through CPaaS providers. Those gaps might not be universal gaps. They might be gaps that are specific to the African market. And that helps us inform some of the capability that MTN wants to expose in this space. So MTN established another business called Genosis with the intention of providing CPaaS-like services in our markets. And some of the services that we're not able to get at a global scale, we request from MTN via Genosis. So just an interesting feature about our interaction with MTN and MTN's Genosis. Lastly, just another slide around our developer ecosystem. Just a little bit of information on why we want to do it and why we think it's important. From the developer's point of view, it's opens up this opportunity for them to get exposure to the app to now over 10 million users in our markets. And those 10 million users are able to engage with their app with or without a data balance, which is really, really important in our markets. We are establishing our developer network in a way that promotes developer education as well. So our partner Digital Academy does, as part of their normal day-to-day business, developer training. And we're trying to build that into what we provide to the developer ecosystem as well. There's lots of platform benefits that are listed there as well that are useful to both us, MTN, and the developers. And then finally, from a user point of view, the whole purpose of the super app is to offer differentiated service and rich services to our users. And having a rich developer ecosystem means that we'll always be stimulating the app with new and interesting ideas and applications over time. That's all for this edition. Thank you very much. Looking forward to any questions that might come through via the portal and happy to answer those there.